Hello, everyone. I'm John Meyerhofer, and I am a systems librarian at the Hill Museum and Manuscript Library. And I have the honor of entirely changing gears for this session for today. We're going to take just a little look at Python programming language, just to kind of get a taste. But my goal is to hopefully not overwhelm you, but give you some tools and some techniques that you can hopefully then take back to your computer or wherever you are, your office, and work through maybe some of the other tutorials or do some tutorials online to learn more about Python. Because I think Python's an easy language to, easy programming language to read. It's an easy entry, but there's a lot of powerful things that you can do with it, especially when it comes to data and working with things on the web. So, just so I can get a sense of the audience, can people raise their hand if they've ever worked with the command line? Have you worked with terminal? Have you made directories from the terminal? Worked with the command line? Okay. How about, has anybody done any Python programming? Couple people who've done some Python programming, all right. How about, has anybody worked with Git or GitHub or anything like that? So a few people, okay. So I think we're gonna, like I said, we're just gonna start out slow, and I'm hoping that this can be kind of a dynamic presentation or talk. This is based on the workshops that Sophia talked about at the Digital Humanities Research Institute. So I'm just gonna kind of follow that. I've never taught it before, so you're walking through this the first time as me, same with me. So hopefully, if you have questions, raise your hands. If you don't understand something, raise your hands. Hopefully people have laptops, they can log on and they can just try stuff. I tend to think of programming as, let's try stuff, okay? Let's just experiment, and you're not gonna break anything. That's the wonderful thing, all right? Okay, so before we jump into Python, let's take a look at the command line. So just to say again, all of these workshops are on this website, the dhinstitutes.org, June 2018 curriculum. So you can always come back to this website, pull up the repo, which is this repository over here on the right, and basically it's just kind of like an online book. So you can see, you can read the introduction, and then you can start going through each step. And we'll do some of the Python, but I just wanted to point out that as you maybe come back and try the command line repo, you can try the GitHub one, kind of work your way through some of these. We'll work a little bit through the command line and a little bit through the Python for Humanists today. So that's a good tool for coming back and learning Python. The other thing I kind of wanted to just talk about before we get started is Python Anywhere. Has anyone used Python Anywhere before? So this is one of my favorite sites for learning and working with Python, because one, it's free. Everybody can create a free account. But also, for free, what you get is you get kind of a WYSIWYG or a command line interface for working with Bash, command line, Python. You can also create web apps, which run one time every day. There's a lot of power with this program, and it's all free. You can create databases. So what I just want to talk about before we jump in is hopefully everybody's logged into their Python program, or Python account rather. The dashboard basically just shows you the consoles, and those are going to be like where you run commands, your files, and that, think of just as like a file explorer or Google Drive. You're going to go and you're going to navigate through your files that way. And we don't really need to worry about any of the others for what we'll talk about today. The database is a powerful tool. You can create like a MySQL database. So when you go back to this workshop with the databases and tiny data, you could actually use Python Anywhere to create a MySQL database and work with a MySQL database there. And when you're really ready, you can use Python to interact with that database. So there's a lot of power just with this free online program. All right, so what we'll do is we'll jump in just to a console first. So if you're logged into Python anywhere, if you just create a new console, and we're just going to create a bash console. Now, bash is just a fancy term for we're just running like underneath all of the WYSIWYG part of Windows or of Apple. It's just running underneath at a command line. So if you were to actually, on my Windows PC, you can see here down at the bottom, if I run a command, so I'm going to use the command prompt. This is the exact, not exact, but it's very close, very similar. It's running like a bash or a command line prompt in Windows. The terminal program is a very similar program on Macs. So that's what we're doing. But the nice thing here is that we can run this command line program in Python anywhere. All right. Anybody, any questions? All right. So now we're at this command line. What can we do? What are we? You know, what's so fancy about this? So we can hit enter, and we're just going to keep getting command prompts. We can see where we are. So unlike File Explorer, when I open File Explorer, I can see where I am visually, right? I can open up the, I can open the C drive, and I can see all of the folders. I can see all the files. If I go into my Python 2.7 folder, I can see all the folders and I can see all the files. But the command line doesn't offer you that kind of visual interface. So in order to see where we are, we have to use a command called, I think it's called personal working directory. So pwd, if you hit that and you type that and you hit enter, that shows you where you are. So it's a very nice command to just like if you get lost on the command line as you navigate folders and you don't know where you are, just type pwd and then you know where you are. The other thing that you can do that simulates the File Explorer experience is you can type ls, which is list, and that will list all of the files and folders that are in that current folder that you're in. So you can see here, right now I've got a readme text folder, and I've got a dhconf folder, and I've got, or a file. The readme text is a file, and the dhconf and dhconf2 are folders. Now how do I know that? I know that because I created those, but if you wanted to find out more information about those, there's parameters that you can pass to the ls command. The one that I use in my work is if I do a -sign LAH. So what that does is that tells the list command, give me more information. I need more information about these files and folders. So you can see this gave me a whole bunch of information. We're not going to get into all of that today, but that's just another tool in your tool belt you can use if you're as you're navigating a command line. All right. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to make a folder. All right. So in order to make a folder, we're going to use the make directory command, and you can make whatever folder you want. Now, Unix or Linux or whatever they're running on Python anywhere does have stipulations about the types of folders you can have. Like you may not be able to have all special characters. It is case sensitive, so if I enter in uppercase H, lowercase h, ELLO, that's the folder name. It's not lowercase h, ELLO. So now I just made that directory. Now, how are we going to make sure that that directory is there? So if we just do a list command, you can see now I've got a hello folder there. All right? So these are just a few simple commands, but with this kind of small subset, you can easily navigate any kind of command line interface. A couple more commands are the change directory command. So let's say we want to, instead of in File Explorer, I can just double click on a folder and then I can go into that folder. But in the command line, you have to change, you have to tell it that you're going to change the directory, and you have to tell it which directory we want to go to. So I'm going to change the directory into hello. So you can see that my command line changed. It now tells me kind of where I am. But if you remember before, if we type pwd, we can find out where we are exactly. We're in the home Himmel Systems Python's hello directory. Now, if I execute a list here, I'm not going to get anything because there's no files there. That's okay. So let's go back up a folder. Instead of here, what we could do is we could, in File Explorer, we could just click back up the folders and visually navigate back up those folders. But in the command line, we have to change the directory, and we have to tell it to go back up with these two periods. The space is also important, because if you were to type cd period period, it doesn't know what that is. So you have to type cd space dot dot period period. So now you can see again my cursor or my command prompt changed because I went up a directory. And again, we can type that working directory to pwd. We can find out where we are, and we can also list to see what's in that directory. A couple other tips or tricks that help is if you're going to change into a directory, you don't always have to type the whole command or the whole directory name. If I type the letter capital H and I hit the tab key, it will automatically fill in that command or that directory, that folder. The system is smart enough to know that that's the only folder that's there. So I can hit enter. Now I'm back into the hello folder. Now I've just gone back up a level. The one thing I will say is if you try to change to a directory that has a similar name, so here I have dhconf and dhconf2 folders, and if I'm going to hit the tab key here, the system is only smart enough to fill in as much as it knows. So if I actually wanted to enter into the second one, I would have to type 2, and now I'm in the dhconf2 directory. So I can find out where I am. I can see what's in there, nothing. And now I'm back up to my main, this is the main directory.
John?
Yeah.
So how do you create how do you make a directory within a directory?
Sure.
You might have said that and I missed it.
No. That you use that same make directory command. So if we change into the hello directory, and I'm in the hello directory, you can use that make directory again, and I can make another directory here. So now if I type the list command, I can see I've got a by folder in there. And you could keep making directories, just like you can in Windows File Explorer. I could make a directory right here, new folder, new folder, and then you could create another folder underneath that. So you could keep creating folders under folders till you're tired of it.
Okay, so you can just use change directory to get where you want to be, and then wherever you are, if you create a new directory, it's going to be within where you are.
Correct, exactly. Yes. Yep. So make directory makes a directory wherever you are. So a lot of times when you make a directory, and you have to remember to go into that directory first before you start doing stuff, if that's where you want to be.
I tried also make dir test,
Yeah.
and then make dir test/test2, and it'll nest it within that once you've created that original directory, and that does work also. So
Yes.
if you, without going into that folder, you could say just make dir /, so you can just add another.
Yes. That's a great point. Good point.
Where are these files located? Just in the server?
Yep, this is in the Magic Cloud on Python Anywhere servers running. I think they run in England. So it's much like Google Drive, but we just happen to be running Python on this. And this is a nice, like I said, I really like Python Anywhere. I actually subscribe to them. I pay for a paid account because it allows you to do more power. But like, I've used this in classroom classroom where we've done like, we have a meeting about hockey trust and we needed to run some Python scripts. And so everybody just creates a Python Anywhere account and we are all in the same environment. We can all just start running everything. It's kind of a nice way to do that because the one thing about installing Python, and you can install Python on your computers. Installing Python on Windows is a little tricky and it starts to get a little wonky sometimes. I don't know if I touched something. But Python actually does come on your Macs. If you've got a Mac, you have Python installed. You just don't know it. So if you were to open Terminal and type the word Python, you would be able to run Python programs on your Mac. The only thing is right now I think it has 2.7. Yes.
Python 2 versus Python 3.
So I don't know.
I'd say if you're learning, you can try to start with 3.
Yeah, so you might as well start with 3. I know there is syntax differences. So if, there it goes. Maybe. So yeah, like I would say just go 3. And that's, because there is syntax differences and they've changed some things. But if you're learning, you might as well stick with 3. But you will, I think there's a big community that still is on 2.7, like in enterprise software and programs and sites that run on Python. And so I think that the support for that is still there if you wanted to do that. All right, so those are some kind of just a few simple commands that will get you around any kind of command line. So just a few. There's obviously more. I would suggest if you want to learn more about the command line, go through their command line repo. It's really, really nice walkthrough. They'll teach you about creating files and working, searching files, and there's a lot of powerful things you can do with the command line, but you may or may not need to do all of that. This will kind of get you around. Actually, one last command that I feel like is really, really nice is if you use the up arrow key, that takes you to the previous command. Here. So if I hit the up key, you can see how it walks through and it shows me all of the previous commands. So we're just basically walking back in time. So if you type in a big long command and it was really hard to write, but it works, you can always go back up to find that command that you executed. So it's a nice way to save you time from typing. All right, any questions? Command line. Yes?
Could you just show the Digital Humanities Research Institute URL? one more time?
Yes. Everybody, can you see that actually? It's probably really small. Although that's not making it any bigger.
Great, thank you.
Yes. All right, so we're running our bash console here. Now what we can do, so I'm going to switch into kind of the Python Digital Humanities tutorial. I may not talk about everything. If somebody could try to keep me on time, I don't know how much time I've got. How long do I go? 20 more minutes?
25.
25, okay. All right, so I think we'll be okay. I just don't want to overwhelm. So if people have questions or anything, just go ahead and raise your hand. So Python, it's general introduction of Python. Python is a nice scripting language. I'm not a Python expert by any means, but I feel like Python is a nice language because it's very readable. It's whereas you got some of those object-oriented languages like C++ or Java, they start breaking into objects and classes and things. Python can be very, very readable, but you can still do a lot of powerful things like working with data and that kind of thing. let's see here. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to interact with Python, okay? So if you're logged into your bash console in on Python anywhere, wherever you are, you can just type the word Python, okay? And what that does is that launches the program Python. So it's almost like if over here in Windows Explorer, we double-clicked on a text document, and that text document opened in Notepad. So we just opened Notepad by double-clicking on that. What we did over here in the bash console is we launched the Python program. Okay? So you can see down there at the bottom, actually maybe what I'll do is I'll show you one other command. No. So the clear command will clear your screen. So now hopefully people can see. Can everybody see that? That's probably actually really tiny. Let me see if I can make that bigger. Okay, is that a little better maybe? So if you type the Python, you're launching the Python program. So now you can see that the command line changed and we're looking at 3 greater than symbols. So that's how we can kind of tell that we're running Python. All right, so now within Python, we can do things. We can do certain things. Much like in Notepad, we can do certain things. In Python, we can do a little math. So if you type 2 plus 3, Python is smart enough to know what that means. If you type 14 minus 10, Python understands what those symbols mean. It understands what the numbers mean. So you can do math. So why don't you just try a couple? We don't need to belabor it. So that's kind of interesting, I guess. I don't know what kind of application that would be, but that's interesting. The one thing that you should know before we maybe go too far is to get out of Python, just like over here we would close a program using the X or exit. Over here to exit Python, we have to type the word exit and then paren. So now you can see my cursor's changed back to that $sign. So now I'm back to that bash console where I can find out where I am or list the contents. Any questions? Great. All right. So if we go to the next lesson, we're going to go back into Python and we're going to learn about types. So types are classifications and classifications of data. So just think of them as types of data. So you've got integers, whole numbers, you've got float numbers, strings, booleans. These are how you can describe things to Python or how Python describes them to you. So if you pass the word hello to Python, Python assumes that's a string. If you pass the word, or if you pass the value 1, 2, 3, Python might assume that that's a number. But maybe you want that to be a string because you want to show that string to a user. So you need to tell Python, this is actually a string, not a number. Python's smart enough to know that that's a number, but you may need to tell it differently. So that's where types come in. So if we type 1, you can see that Python assumes that that's an integer. If we type a string, we can see that Python thinks that's a string. Now, like I said at the beginning, feel free to see what happens if I do this, what happens if I try this, am I gonna break something? So let's see what happens if I just type hello in there. Now, I think somewhere in the tutorial, they do a very good job of talking about error statements from Python. Now, I'm not going to go into all of them, and actually, I probably don't even understand all of them. But this message that we received here is basically, is telling us Python doesn't know what you're trying to do. It actually thinks that hello is a variable. That's what it's trying to do. But hello hasn't been defined. We haven't defined that variable. So Python will just give us an error, and we didn't wreck anything, we didn't break anything. It just told us that doesn't work. So you can see here back at the lesson, there's other types. There's floats, booleans, and then you can also have lists. So here we have a list of 3 numbers. And all of this is kind of building that base of understanding so that when we do write a Python program, we can work within those confines, if that makes sense. So those are types. We can also have, I think one thing to note is we can have a type of, we can have a type of numbers, like this. Or we can also have a type of type list of strings.
There's a bracket
Bracket.
after hello.
There's a bracket up hello.
Oh, I did have a bracket. So here again, if I use that up arrow key, I can just go back to the last command. I don't have to retype it. So if I go up, now I need my bracket to make sure that I have my syntax correct. Then I can hit enter. And now Python understands that. It's syntaxically correct. Any questions on types? Great. All right, so now before we got that error about a variable, we're going to go into variables now. And variables are, in programming, a nice way to assign values to things and then use those values in multiple locations. So a variable is a symbol that refers to an object, such as a string, integer, or list. So you could have a variable that refers to a list, that big long list. Why don't you, if you're still logged into Python anywhere, why don't you just try some of these commands? We'll walk through setting a variable x equal to 5. So now we didn't see anything happen, but behind the scenes, Python, it now remembers that x is actually equal to 5. So if we type x, we want to know what the value of that is, so Python spits out the value of 5. So it tells us it's assigned to 5. We can also use that variable in equations. So we're saying, just like math, everybody remembers math, algebra. So we can have x plus 10. So Python is smart enough to take the value of x and add it to 10. We can also use variables to string strings together. So if we set the variable y equal to hello, and then we type y, Python tells us that that variable is equal to the string hello. But we can also use that in to string together. So Python took the string hello and added it to the other string.
happens if I assign two values? First x equals 5, another equals 10. Will it memorize the second one? Or
Yes.
give me syntax error?
So you're thinking about if I say x equals 5, and if I say x again,
Yeah, x equals
10. Now we're going to ask, what is x? X is 10. X is the last assigned value. Because when you assign a value to it, it overwrites any other value that it had before. And that's a common problem actually sometimes when you evaluate a value, in programming you'll say like, if x is equal to 10, then do something. But a lot of times the syntax is different. It's not x equals 10, it's x equal equal, which means you're supposed to evaluate the string, not assign the value, if that makes sense.
Yeah, actually the right string.
Yes,
Makes sense.
yes, yeah. So that's a way we can use variables. Like here it says in the tutorial, variables can actually be lists of strings. So let's go through that actually. If we say we're going to assign the variable breakfast equal to all of this list of strings. Now if we want to know what breakfast is, it's that list of strings. And here again, if going back to the previous lesson, we can find out what type the variable is. So remember before when I typed hello and it didn't know what to do with it because it thought it was an actual variable. This time we're going to find out what the type of breakfast is, and that is an actual assigned variable now. So we can see that it's a list. I wish they had. No, I wish I had done that. So there's ways that you can refer to the individual strings within there. I can't remember what the syntax is, and they don't have it here. So there, maybe we'll do that later. But that's variables within Python. So one thing you should know is that variables can have letters and numbers and underscores in them, but they should always start with a letter. So here in the challenge, they ask us what would happen if we tried to assign a variable equal to a string if it did have a number in the front. Does anybody have a guess? As they ask, will our computer explode? Anybody have any guesses?
Or give us some syntax error or something?
Yeah, we've already had quite a few syntax errors, haven't we? So that's probably a good guess. So yes, invalid syntax. It's saying you can't do that. So here's a case where, and the tutorial actually does a good job. One of the lessons is learning how to go to Google and search for answers, because as a programmer you do this a lot. What's the syntax for this? How do I do this? These are things that you might not necessarily know everything how to do. You just need to have a concept of how you want to do it, but you just need to learn the syntax for a specific language. So here, if we ran this error, you might say, well, what's going on? What's wrong? And then you might do a search and on Google, and you'd say, my variable name is, and then you'd find out, hopefully, that you can't have numbers. Your variables have to start with the letter. So they're also asking, like, what if I assign a variable like with some special characters? It doesn't like that either. So again, variables can have letters, numbers, and underscores, and should start with a letter. A lot of times too, I try to name my variables so they're helpful. So if a variable name is first underscore name, and you see that in your code, you're invariably going to think that that's the first name as you're using, filling out a form, or you're using that data within your Python program. Any questions on variables before we go to the next lesson? I'm hoping to get to a certain point where we can actually run a script. Okay, so this is where we've kind of created a base now. Now we're going to go and we're going to create our first Python script. Okay, so the one thing we can do from the Python command line is if we type print and then a string, it will print it out. So that's a command that Python understands what to do with. So here's where we can see a little bit of the power of Python Anywhere as well. What we're going to do is why don't we exit out of Python back to our bash shell, and we're actually going to exit out of that as well. So Python Anywhere is telling us we've closed this console is closed. Now within Python Anywhere, if you don't know where you are, you're lost, if you can't figure out how to get somewhere, the hamburger menu is a nice tool because it'll take you to those big heading kind of areas. You can always just go back to the dashboard no matter where you are. If we open a console, and this console is running, and we're doing stuff, we can actually just go to the dashboard. But what you can see is that Python Anywhere says, it's telling us, you've got a console that's open. And Python Anywhere will just keep that open, it'll keep it running for us, it'll take care of that for us. But what we want to do is we want to create a new file. So we could do that via the command line. We could learn about Vim and text editors and all this stuff, but we're going to use the power of Python Anywhere. We're just going to create a new file. So if you go to the file's main heading, let me make this a little bit bigger. You can see that this is a nice GUI interface. It's almost simulating a file explorer interface for our virtual computer that we're running on Python Anywhere. You can see my folders that I created. You can see those on the left. My hello folder. You can see all the files that are listed here as well. So if I go into this hello folder, there's my bye folder, the folder that I created from the command line. So you could actually create another folder here, or you could create it from the command line. So there's power with this GUI kind of interface. So what we're going to do is we're going to create our first Python script. So if you created a folder, you can go into that folder. If you don't want to, you can create the file right here, kind of in the root of your Python Anywhere program. So we're going to create a hello, .py program. The file rather. The .py signifies to almost all operating systems that's a Python program. So if it's got Python, it will run that file as a Python program. Just like when I opened this .txt file, Windows knew what to do with that file. It knew to open it in text editor, or a notepad rather. So this hello py is now a file that's open. The nice thing about Python Anywhere is, again, it's got kind of this GUI interface where you can create the file here. You don't have to there's command line text editors like Vim and Emacs and all these old other ones. They tend to be tricky in the syntax, and they can create more headaches than are worth running. That's why I kind of like this nice interface where you can create a Python program. So what we're going to do is if you just copy and paste that print hello world, or type it in, hello world command into that file. And if you save it, now the hello.py file has the command print hello world in it. Now, Python Anywhere allows us to run this program here. It allows us to open a bash console to try to run it. It gives us multiple ways to run it. So I'm going to run through a few of those so you can just see the different ways that you could actually run this program. So if I click the blue button up here, I could just run this program right now. So what it does is it opens a Python environment down below, and then it'll actually kick off that program. It'll run that program. So you can see it ran it, and it printed out hello world. The other way I could run this is if I go back to my consoles, I can see I'm running two consoles right now. But let's go back to that bash console that I was running before, or you guys can open a new one if you need to. But if we go back to that bash console, let's try to run the program from here. Okay? So first, let's figure out where we are, because I forgot. It's been a while since I've been on this console, and I can see that I'm just right in my root, but I can't remember where I saved that hello Python program. So if I list, I can see that I saved it here. So it's right in that directory. So in order to run that program, if you just type Python and then space the Python name, the file name, it will run that. So we saw before how the Python command launched you into kind of a Python environment, but if you append or you pass this parameter of the file name, it will run that program. So you can see that it just ran that program. So, as they say here in the lesson, congratulations, you've written your first script. 2 minutes? Okay, wow. So, trying to think of how I can end up here. So, that's really kind of where you start to see the power of Python is creating your list of commands in your files and then running them elsewhere. So if you wrote a whole bunch of scripts and you can create ifs and else and loops and you can do all that programming stuff in here, you can read files in. So if you have, say, a big CSV file that's got a bunch of data, you wanted to read that file in, you can then interpret that data and you can print it out and you can string it together. You can do a bunch of Python kind of things with it. But this is kind of where you start seeing the power of a program that can do multiple things, not just one single thing when you're running it from the command line. So maybe just to kind of close, hopefully you've gotten some introduction to Python Anywhere. Again, I would stress the workshops. If you start working through these, those are very good introductions to especially command line and this Python for Humanists. That's the one that I've been doing, but I know there's a few more lessons. And if you get really brave, you can use this, or you can do this natural learning techniques. It's about, what is it about? Using Python to read in data. So that's whoops, it's right here. So using Python for natural language processing and stuff. So that would, I think those are a few good lessons to kind of, you could work your way up to those. Another site that I will just plug is this Programming Historian. It's originally kind of written by history profs at colleges who go through and they just write lessons on individual things that you may or may want to do. Some of the lessons they're very approachable. Like you can learn about Sparkle, or you can learn about MySQL with R, and there's some Python programs. That's kind of why I wanted to mention it. You can learn about creating an API with Python and Flask, there's. If you haven't explored this site, I would highly recommend it. So I think we'll leave it at that. Yeah. If anybody has questions, feel free to reach out and email me or ask me later. I am on campus. I'm, like I said, at the Hill Museum and Manuscript Library. So feel free to email me anytime if you've got Python programs and hopefully or questions, and hopefully I can help.